Thank you so much, Dr. Berger, for somebody who represents perfection as a teacher, a Rebbe, a scholar, an Eved Hashem. It's my honor to be in your presence, to be in the presence of another fine teacher of mine, Dean Mordechai Cohn. Where's Rabbi Dr. Cohn? Is he there? There you go. Dean Cohn. Rabbi Blau. Of course, our distinguished panelists. It's always a pleasure to be with Dean Bacon. And our distinguished Board of Trustee member, Erwin Shapiro. It's wonderful to be with you and Ruth this evening, and to be with all of you on this very special occasion. You know, the fundamental changes that are reshaping our world, whether technological or social, are occurring at an unimaginable, swift pace. This is certainly true in the worlds of medicine, communication, and computing. And it's also true as well in the social realms, as we gain further insight into the human condition from a variety of perspectives. New thinkings have evolved about personal identity, education, and family, and more. This is a miraculous time to be alive, both for the Jewish people specifically and for all of humanity. The opportunities for redeeming the world by transforming it for the better are real and immediate. Perhaps in no other field are these new opportunities more apparent than in the study of Torah, for women and also for men. Now, I can certainly do my best to articulate these opportunities when it comes to Talmud Torah for women and what they mean for all of us as aspiring Ovdei Hashem. But in this case, as in all cases, I defer to the superior wisdom and eloquence of Mori V'Rabbi, Rav Aaron Lichtenstein Zatzal. In his remarks in honor of the founding of Mayanot Yeshiva High School, Rav Lichtenstein Zatzal, Mori V'Rabbi, wrote the following in reflection on women's Torah study. Moreover, today there is not only greater need for women's Talmud Torah, there is also greater opportunity, greater readiness, communally speaking, to engage women seriously, intellectually, in general terms, and with regards to Torah particularly. We have been zoche in this generation, in Eretz Yisrael and here as well, to see the spread of serious and intensive Torah study at levels which by and large were not prevalent only a generation or two ago. That is an opportunity which certainly we want our daughters to take seriously out of the conviction that quite apart from assuring the fundamental Shmirat HaMitzvot and Yirat Shamayim, even with that assured, out of the conviction that deepening their involvement in Talmud Torah is going to enrich and enhance them as religious personalities, as Ovdei Hashem. Even as there is on the one hand a greater need in order to assure the minimum, there's a greater opportunity in striving for the maximum. And that's what we do. And that's what we need to do, to strive for the maximum. As we gather together this evening at an event tying together so many of Yeshiva University's vast intellectual resources, from the Bernard Revel Graduate School to Central High School to GPATS and more, we can glimpse this greater opportunity in action. May this auspicious and ambitious event spark further conversation on how to capitalize on the wondrous opportunities for Torah study presented to us by the world of the future. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. At this point, I will introduce the speaker for the first part of our program. Jackie Rosensweig is one of the most impressive doctoral students that we have at the Bernard Revel Graduate School. And it happens that she is doing a dissertation on a subject of, I think, great importance and great relevance to what is happening today in women's education, even outside of Aguda circles. which of course is where Bais Yaakov was more or less born. And I think that you will have the opportunity to experience the evidence for the evaluation that I just reported to you.
Thank you so much to Dean Berger and to President Berman for the introductions, the very humbling introduction, and to everyone who brought this event together this evening, brought me here and the rest of the panel here this evening. And a special thank you to the students and others who came out here tonight in the middle of midterms and a busy time of the year generally. Tonight's event is very well scheduled because now that we are in Chodesh Nisan, we are ready to mark exactly Chodesh Cheshvan, my bad. Exactly the centennial anniversary of the founding of the first Bais Yaakov class by Sarah Schneerer in the fall of 1917. That is, if we are to trust Sarah Schneerer's original sources as reprinted in her Gesammelte Schriften. However, there are other founders of Bais Yaakov whose sources in the interwar period will dispute that very date. However, if we are for now to trust Sarah Schneerer's own dating of when she turned her dress shop into a schoolhouse in 1917, then right now we do find ourselves marking a very important 100th anniversary. Important as a turning point in various aspects of Jewish history, as well as a very important anniversary of a touchstone in Jewish memory. But first, the history. The school that Sarah Schneerer founded, as is well known, soon branched out into a network of schools far beyond Krakow, with day schools and shtetl schoolhouses in over 260 towns in Poland, if one believes Bais Yaakov propaganda. My count brings it to more than 325 branches, actually, they undercount, as well as outposts in many other countries as well. Besides for Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Austria, France, Britain, Italy, Palestine, the United States, perhaps very surprisingly, Yugoslavia. Bais Yaakov was really in about 13 different countries before the Holocaust. And the crown jewel of this network was the Krakow Seminary, where Schneerer served as a living legend until her death in 1935 and played a very tangible role as the spiritual model for the aspiring teachers who were educated there and maintained a very active correspondence with them after they graduated. While the Holocaust destroyed all of the schools of Eastern European Bais Yaakov, as well as wiping out nearly all of its participants, Bais Yaakov schools, of course, as we know, survived and thrived in their resettlements in America and Israel and Western Europe, where survivors filled the faculty ranks. And to this day, Bais Yaakov schools, while they are no longer members of a formal network as they had been, at least outside of Israel, continue to enroll tens of thousands of students, perhaps even more accurately, hundreds of thousands of students, who attend schools bearing the Bais Yaakov name, or at least that claim informally affiliation to the more amorphous Bais Yaakov brand, which still does claim a fair amount of carryover in content from what that brand entailed in the interwar movement. And so, for these reasons, Bais Yaakov, as established in 1919, does continue to bear historical significance to our times. But perhaps just as importantly, Bais Yaakov continues to feature in our discourse today, even for those who perhaps do not attend Bais Yaakov schools, as Dean Berger alluded, as it is remembered as the precedent for a major abrupt shift in the position of women in the world of Talmud Torah and Jewish education. And therefore, the process by which there was a normalization of Jewish schooling for girls under the heading of Bais Yaakov finds its way all the time as a piece of evidence in various discussions about the boundaries of women's roles in the halachic world and how those positions find legitimacy if they do change over time. One contribution to that discourse was an article published this past summer in August by Leslie Ginsparg Klein in the Lair House online. It's an excellent article. Leslie Ginsparg Klein tries to serve as a corrective to the way that Sarah Schneerer's story is incorrectly remembered within the popular Orthodox Yeshiva writing of the Yeshiva world. There she writes that the rise of Bais Yaakov is presented as an important example of the necessity to deferring to Das Torah and of finding rabbinic consensus as a precondition for changes. She notes that this collective memory reflects that Sarah Schneerer relied upon tshuvot signed by the greatest of the generation's halachic leadership before proceeding with her venture, and in so doing, at least according to Hanoch Teller and the Bais Yaakov cookbook and other, veritable sources, perhaps not footnoted of history, but at least of collective memory, she says that they tried to make a case that Sarah Schneerer followed a normative protocol for establishing a change in women's education. She notes, though, that these narratives, which stress the importance of the tshuvot, really do offer, in fact, a corrupted chronology and therefore an erroneous message. Because the famous responsa that they cite in their works, responsa that maybe you've even seen in high school classes about Talmud Torah for women, that of the Chafetz Chaim, or the Ger Rebbe, or Rav Chaim Ozer Gardzinski, they really date to 1933, 1928, 1929, respectively, which would place them more than 10 years after the founding of Bais Yaakov schools, and after Sarah Schneerer began on her venture. Klein is entirely correct to highlight these errors in the works of Orthodox popular memory. From there, though, Klein concludes that the Orthodox discourse about Bais Yaakov is really an erroneous highlighting of the need for Das Torah and cultural shifts, and she asserts that the true historical message of the founding of Bais Yaakov is that of the tremendous potential of grassroots visionaries. And here I'll quote her. The community was waiting for a change to come from above, from the leadership. Schneerer was not the first to suggest starting schools for girls, but instead of talking or waiting, Schneerer took action. She started on a grassroots level, from the ground up, ellipses. The true legacy of Sarah Schneerer is that one person can make an incredibly positive change. And in the time remaining this evening, what I'd like to explore together is the real story of how Bais Yaakov came from its roots, when it actually began, considering that Bais Yaakov writers don't seem so sure themselves, how it found legitimization, and try to reach for a narrative perhaps somewhere in between the Orthodox hagiographies that assert that she followed Das Torah to a T, or rather that she followed tshuvot that we know had not yet been written. That seems a little difficult to do. And perhaps also something of a reaction to Leslie Ginsburg Klein's suggestion that Schneerer's school was a grassroots, upstartish insurgency that could not or would not have been allowed widely had she not blazed the path forward first and caused herself the change in rabbinic sentiment. So perhaps some background to the formation of Bais Yaakov schools is in order, and maybe some challenging of our regnant collective memory of exactly what it is about Bais Yaakov schools that Bais Yaakov innovated. The most important piece to understanding the emergence of Bais Yaakov is that it developed at exactly the right time. Conditions had changed enough, even in just the few years before 1917, among rabbinic attitudes, among political conditions, among the organization of orthodoxy, and among the interplay of Eastern European and Western European rabbinic influences, especially in Poland, that Schneerer just so happened to start teaching girls just about in the exact same year when many rabbis in Poland were beginning to say to themselves that this would be a great idea. Little did they know what she was doing, little did she know what they were saying. So first about rabbinic sentiment and how it shifted. It would be wrong to think that the rabbis in Eastern Europe through most of the 19th century had truly discouraged basic Torah knowledge for girls. While we know that the general rabbinic view about Torah learning for girls was one of Kol HaMelamed et Bito Torah Ki'ilu Melamda Tiflut, going from the Mishnah Sota, Gimel Daled, there was already, before Bais Yaakov, a fair amount of understanding that a basic girls' education did not run afoul of the injunction against teaching Tiflut. Shal Stamfer has done a tremendous amount of research highlighting that really many girls in many shtetls did attend many chadarim, usually just for short periods of time, to gain basic literacy. They didn't make it onto the enrollment rolls or anything like that, but they often did attend. And Yisker Bucher attests that by the early 20th century, in no small number of Polish towns, there would be a woman, perhaps the Rebbitzin, taking on some level of formality, probably rather informal, teaching of girls. One example is in Tishovtze, where there was actually Binela the Rebbetzin, who did take on sort of informal cheder studies for girls in her house. Obviously not for very many years of cheder study, but girls would attend and learn basic Torah. And in Western Europe, Torah education for girls was far more formalized, and the Hirsch Yeshiva in Frankfurt had separate classes for girls starting not so long after it was founded in 1858, 60 years before Bais Yaakov. So the Western model already offered Torah education for girls, and the Western model had already been imported to Eastern Europe before Sarah Schneerer as well. In fact, the first founding conference of Bais Yaakov, where they signed the official ordinance that they will be starting a Krakow seminary in 1925, was hosted in the Chavat Girls High School. Chavat had been founded earlier in the 1910s, and it was a high school for girls in Warsaw of a neo-Orthodox orientation. Its administration were German neo-Orthodox rabbis. And according to the memoirs of girls who attended, it seems like the school was primarily for the daughters of the very, very rich or very rabbinic families. But Schneerer's one-room schoolhouse that she began in 1917 with 25 students in her dress shop was far from the first classroom where girls were taught. And then in those first few decades of the 20th century, we really do see a continuing shift in attitudes. At the Rabbinic Conference hosted in Krakow in 1903, which had attendance of rabbis and various leadership position figures from all across Poland and further, there was a motion to call for girls' education, and it was heavily debated before being voted down, as Rachel Manneken has extensively researched. Its discussion at all, though, showed that many had believed that its time had come, or had at least nearly come. And then in 1911, the Chafetz Chaim's comments were published in a footnote in his Likutei Halachot, where he explicitly encouraged girls to get a basic Torah education in Chumash and Pirkei Avos, and in the parts of halacha relevant to women's practice, even if that involved tiny forays into Torah Sheba'al Peh, and assured that this did not qualify as tiflut. He emphasized that in the contemporary climate, it was necessary to ensure that girls have enough Torah grounding to remain firm in the face of assimilationist pressures. Now, this tshuva is sometimes erroneously assumed to be the one that blanketly endorsed Bais Yaakov schools. It obviously could not have been, because it came 6 years before Sarah Schneerer planned her career change. And he does not anywhere in this footnote explicitly endorse schooling or systems of schooling for Jewish girls. It sounds more like he's advocating for personal tutoring in the home by parents or others. However, the curriculum that he describes does more or less match what Bais Yaakov schools would do only a few short years later. Now, publishing a footnote is not exactly a way to articulate a major policy change. This leaves us to wonder quite what the Chafetz Chaim was thinking. Does he not think that what he is writing entails a massive policy change? Was he just scared to articulate a massive policy change? Whichever case may be, it is clear that the curriculum for which he advocated did look certainly quite different from the girls' Torah curricula articulated previously, even in those neo-Orthodox schools that had existed for 60 years. In the Hirsch Yeshiva in Frankfurt and in the Chavat High School in Warsaw, there was only one period a day of Hebrewish studies, not an extensive curriculum. But the real shift in attitudes came with two fairly simultaneous developments that really hug one another in how they emerge. And they are the development of politically organized orthodoxy in the form of Agudas Yisrael and the social displacements of the First World War. We always remember how mind-alteringly devastating the Second World War was, and all too often in its shadows we forget just how profoundly displacing World War I was for many of the Jews who experienced it. For many, it involved being out of their homes for 3 or 4 years, for the adolescents and teenagers, an interruption of their domestic or educational rhythms, German occupation of many territories. Then there's a Bolshevik revolution, and we're marking a centennial of that too right around now. So in many ways, World War I was a significantly displacing event. And right around the exact same time as World War I comes the emergence of Agudas Yisrael, which lay its foundational groundwork in 1912, but really only firmed its founding during the war years and really at the war's end. Aguda was a union, as its name suggests, and its main components were neo-Orthodox Hirschians of Western Europe and moderate Hasidim, especially the Gerer Hasidim, mostly located in Congress, Poland. And during the war itself, while Germany controlled many parts of Poland, Aguda dispatched 2 German rabbis, tacitly on a sort of military, in agreement with the German occupation, sort of a mission. They went on an exploratory trip for Aguda to Eastern Europe to make plans for what Aguda's agenda would be in making a more organized Orthodox existence in Eastern Europe after the war. The rabbis were Pinchas Cohn and Emanuel Carlebach. And in 1916, these 2 rabbis created a modernized cheder system called Yesodei HaTorah. It would enroll twice as many boys as Bais Yaakov enrolled girls. They also evaluated starting schools for girls. They didn't reach many conclusions, but they evaluated and strongly considered. Then, in 1917, should I continue? Yeah, okay. Then in 1917 and into 1918, when the war was over, Poland formed its new Second Polish Republic, and this would create new opportunities as well as new challenges. In this new country, women had the right to vote. They would also, along with the boys, be forced to participate in new compulsory laws calling for Polish primary education. Girls would be citizens by nature, and Jewish girls would face assimilationary threats like never before by legal mandate. We know the Sarashnirer legend presenting that girls in that generation were leaving Orthodoxy faster than ever before. There is lots of truth to that sort of legend. Some scholars do estimate that of the Jews who practiced Orthodox traditional halachic practice in 1919, of those who remained alive and around in Poland by 1939, half of them probably had defected from Orthodox practice. It was quite widespread. Agudas Yisrael now in 1917 and 18 therefore had a more clear purpose than ever before to organize Orthodoxy as a legion of citizens, where they could be represented as a party in the Polish Senate, the same, where they could lobby for legal protection for Shabbos and for Kashrus, where they could create independent schools and possibly get the children out of public school, or at least absolve them of some schooling obligations. Parenthetically, Bais Yaakov did not succeed in doing that for the most part, because more than 80% of students in Poland who attended Bais Yaakov attended it as supplementary school and were still in public school in the morning. But getting Jewish girls on board to this whole program would not only save the Jewish people, it would have a dual function of assisting Aguda in finding electoral success by doubling its voter rolls. For many reasons, the ground was shifting. Aguda's first activities involved trying to create infrastructure that could stem the wave of religious defection that followed the war's upheavals. And in the first years after World War I, most of the leadership of Agudas Yisrael, even within Poland, were still Western Europeans. Many of them had come during the war years when many people were on the move. And those leaders called for formal schools very high on the Aguda agenda. Many of the Polish rabbinate involved in Aguda turned to their side very quickly as well. One, Mishulam Kamener, a leading activist and bureaucrat for Aguda in Warsaw, called upon Aguda to establish a school network for girls in 1918 to prevent the girls from attending public schools. Most likely, Kamener had no idea about a woman named Sarah Schneerer and her little schoolhouse teaching a few dozen girls in Krakow already for a year by that time. It's not clear that Sarah Schneerer knew what he was calling for either. And now maybe we should return to Sarah Schneerer. During World War I, she had an epiphany while listening to a neo-Orthodox rabbi's German sermon in Vienna, Rabbi Moses Flesch, and she decided that it was her mission to teach teach Torah to girls. Twice in the mid-1910s during the war years, she attempted ventures of starting evening lectures and classes for Jewish female youth, and they were not successful. Again, part of the failures of these ventures might have come from their timing. Public opinion was shifting very rapidly over the course of the years 1915, 1916, 1917, 1918, and not as much before that. Alternatively, it might have had something to do with the exact cynical teenage girls that she was attracting in her living room at the time. But back in Krakow in 1917, she returned to her dress shop and then had an epiphany again when she decided to make a third attempt, and this time teach young primary school-aged children and maybe get them out of the Polish public schools, which she did not much succeed at, but okay. Since this attempt was more planned, and it was not just an effort at sporadic evening lectures, it's perfectly understandable that at this point, and not sooner, she deemed it appropriate to ask a shaila. And the rabbi who she asked for guidance was the rabbi with whom her family had the greatest connection, the Belzer Rebbe. It's not really so surprising, considering the context and considering what she asked, that he said yes. Her brother, who was spending the summer with the Rebbe in his court, then vacationing in Marienbad, presented him with the zettel, the note, which read, "My sister wants to educate Jewish girls in the spirit of Yiddishkeit and Torah." To which the Belzer Rebbe famously responded, "Brucha v'hatzlacha." This permission was good enough for Sarah Schneerer, but it deserves a little unpacking. We don't know if the Rebbe understood that the question was referring to opening schools or just teaching them Yiddishkeit and Torah. We also don't know quite what Sarah Schneerer had in mind either at this point in her venture. Previously, she had been doing evening lectures for girls. Presumably, since she thought this deserved a shaila, she thought she was going to be opening a school. Probably with about the 25 students that she had. In Western Europe, like the world of the Viennese rabbi that so inspired her, this education existed, albeit maybe fewer subjects taught than she wanted to teach. The Rebbe, the Belzer Rebbe, did not either think that he didn't think this was a major change, what she's doing, or he really did not quite understand what she was asking, or perhaps he also thought that times had changed enough to mandate this change. Presumably he thought she would be doing a small house of learning, a sort of informal school. Perhaps he might not have allowed that a few years previously, but it seems that he was perfectly fine with allowing it now. Further down the road, he would come out more publicly to say that he very much believed Bais Yaakov schools were a wonderful thing, but he did not think that girls of Belzer families should attend because the curriculum was insufficiently Belzer in orientation. Sarah Schneerer was so inspired by the works of Rav Hirsch, it sort of became the intellectual orientation of much of what her school's curricula entailed. So the Belzer Rebbe didn't think that his girls should go there, but he did think they were wonderful. Schneerer opened the schoolhouse in 1917 with 25 students, bringing us back to where we started. By 1918, there were reports of over 40 students. And by 1919, her school had really gone far beyond what existed previously, and then really was a historic innovation. And what do I mean by that? Clearly it emerged in the context of so many antecedents. Well, for one thing, the curriculum of Bais Yaakov education, even the primary education, offered deeper mastery in Torah study, at least in Torah Shebichtav, than any of the earlier schools we've mentioned. It did not offer just the single period a day of Hebraish. Rather, it did offer specialized subjects in Chumash, Navi, Tehillim, Yahadus, Pirkei Avot, Jewish history, Tefillah, Yiddish, which would become the standard curriculum of Bais Yaakov schools. My research has found that this standard curriculum often overstated what was actually learned in Bais Yaakov schools. The vast majority of them really, as I have found, toned down that curriculum significantly, but we can leave that aside for now. Bais Yaakov offered all of the Torah that the Chafetz Chaim had wanted girls to learn, and it was the first Jewish school anywhere, as far as I am aware, that officially did so. And secondly, perhaps even more importantly, because I think that the curriculum was less Sarah Schneerer's innovation than what rabbinic consensus had come to allow, Bais Yaakov truly innovated over these earlier schools by organizing itself as a national and international network with hundreds of schools, with a system for teacher certification, with asserting itself to be, at least in theory, a school meant for all Jewish girls, and a new mainstream standard, a new formal understanding of what it is that Jewish girls are meant to do all day. And that is they're meant to go to school and learn Torah and other things too. And that was certainly a tremendous innovation that came out of Bais Yaakov. But by the time Bais Yaakov asserted to be any of those sorts of things, a new mainstream, a new normal, a new national or international standard, by the time it was spreading to other cities and training other teachers, by then Bais Yaakov had already passed on from being run by Sarah Schneerer. By then it was already really the child of Agudas Yisrael. And this brings us back to the beginning where there is some questionable chronology of when exactly Bais Yaakov was founded. If you look in the fundraising materials of the father of the Bais Yaakov movement, of Dr. Leo Deutschlander, the works that he published in 1927 and in 1929, they both contain a chronique, a timeline, for the donors to see where have we come from and what are we doing. And these timelines always say Bais Yaakov was founded in 1919 by Agudas Yisrael. Sarah Schneerer is maybe mentioned in a passing line, but she is not presented as the founder, nor is her schoolhouse of 1917 that she writes about in her diary attested to at all. And there is at least, some grain of truth to the fundraiser's narrative as well. In 1919, in the founding meeting of the Krakow branch of Agudas Yisrael, the initial decisions that this group of men reached when they sat around the table together were, we are going to buy Sarah Schneerer's school. It's unclear if they're the ones who name it Bais Yaakov, or if perhaps it had been named Bais Yaakov 1 year before. I'm honestly not sure on that one. But they adopted Sarah Schneerer's school. They arranged to hire more teachers. They rented her a proper facility that was an entire floor of an apartment building. And they organized that there would be multiple classes operating simultaneously, suggesting very strongly that Sarah Schneerer is no longer the only one teaching Bais Yaakov, but other people, and probably not even her students yet, are teaching Bais Yaakov too. In 1921, the oldest graduates of this school began to found their own Bais Yaakov schools in nearby towns. At this time, each teacher went off to the nearby town with a packet of lesson plans, hand-copied by Sarah Schneerer, telling them what they should teach. The discourses were very elementary. Who bist du? Who are you? I'm a Jewish child. How are you a Jewish child? Because Hashem created me. These lesson plans did not provide enough material for the teachers to teach for very long. Not a full school, more like a course. And when that course was concluded, all of those schools, one by one, closed down. In Tarnov and Lutatov and other places, the initial Bais Yaakov schools didn't have much lasting or staying power. It's not until the seminary was truly founded in 1925 and Judith Grunfeld comes in that schools and new branches formed in other towns really took off. And Judith Grunfeld, who becomes the principal of the seminary, would write, when she came in 1925, Bais Yaakov had been founded 4 years before. In 1921, leading to even more confusion about when Bais Yaakov began. But truly, you could say another founding year of Bais Yaakov was in 1923 at the second Knessia Gedola of Agudas Yisrael in Vienna, famous for its footage of the Chafetz Chaim, where the international movement proclaimed that Bais Yaakov schools would be the girls' school network of the movement. They hired Dr. Leo Deutschlander in a sort of forerunner of the Torah Masorah to be the fundraiser and to organize offices that would spread out branch schools all over and pay for these branch schools. Leo Deutschlander was a dynamo. He's the one that produces these fundraising publications, and he sent out Bais Yaakov fundraising chapters all over the world. There was a Friends of Bais Yaakov in Sioux City, Iowa by 1929. In addition to there being in many other American states and countries all over the world as well. By that point, Sarah Schneerer was, in these documents, but a footnote. To the students who were learning under her, to the teachers who were training under her, she was anything but a footnote. She was very much the be-all and end-all, the message and the spiritual guide to what they were doing. But what made Bais Yaakov mainstream was not what Sarah Schneerer innovated. It was what Agudas Yisrael adapted and created as their program. So was Sarah Schneerer an insurgent and an upstart? To be sure, it helped that she was a divorced woman, more disconnected from natural ties to male authority, who could start telling her what to do, and she could teach her own school in her own way. Certainly her own sense of vision and drive was essential. Her story remains a legitimately inspirational one. Her bond with her students, even in the 20s and into the 30s, was absolutely authentic. But the curriculum that she favored had already been sort of tacitly permitted, and the ambitious network of schools that she founded was far more the vision of the rabbinic establishment than it was hers. Albeit that the rabbinic establishment would not come to articulate in writing their halakhic case for it in Teshuvot until 10 years later. But clearly it was their vision more than hers. She profited from having an idea at the same time as a rabbinic establishment or consensus of Polish Jews faced new threats from public schools and from political engagement, and happened to be at the same time that the Agudas Yisrael, with its leadership of Western rabbis, had began to much more formally expand its vision of organized school networks in Western Europe. So the formal responsa sanctioning Bais Yaakov may have been written after the fact, but Bais Yaakov became mainstream by capitalizing on changes that had begun their emergence really within the rabbinic establishment. Thank you.
We will have a question and answer session after the entire program. Thank you very much. At this point, I am honored really to introduce the chair of the second part of this program. I went to Yeshiva College at the same time that Karen Bacon went to Stern College. And I can testify that what she did over the years as the Dean of Stern College was absolutely remarkable. And when a decision was made several years ago to have a single Dean of Yeshiva College and Stern College, it was a job that many of us considered to be undoable. But if it was doable, there is only one person who could have been considered as a possibility to do it, and she has done it. Karen.
I don't know if I should thank you for embarrassing me, but thank you. Thank you very much. Our program this evening is titled Women's Torah Education Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. And the panel we're going to have next is about the impact of Yeshiva University on women's Torah education. The panelists that I'm going to introduce shortly represent today and tomorrow, but I just want to take a moment to talk about yesterday and Stern College. Stern College opened in 1954 with a handful of young women who took a chance on an unknown institution. Today, we educate approximately 1,000 women here at the Barron Center. And the question might come to your mind, is the Stern College of 1954 the same Stern College of 2017? So I want to read to you just a bit from an early catalog of Stern College. It's actually the earliest one I could find because it isn't digitized. Okay, so this is from a very early catalog. It says, Stern College for Women, paralleling Yeshiva College, is the Women's College of Arts and Sciences of Yeshiva University. It was established in 1954 through a major gift from Max Stern of New York, prominent community leader and vice chairman of the university's Board of Trustees, given in memory of his parents, Emanuel and Caroline Stern. The primary objective of Stern College is to provide young women with an education in the liberal arts and sciences, and at the same time a rich grounding in Jewish learning and traditions. Emphasizing the importance of the humanities, the curriculum is designed to prepare the modern young woman for cultural appreciation, graduate study, a fruitful career, intelligent citizenship, and successful management of a Jewish home and family. So some of the language here is quaint, and some of it is maybe raise some of your hackles, but I think a lot of the substance here really remains true for Stern College today. I would reverse some of the words, but Torah, liberal arts and science, an emphasis on science and humanities, for preparation for graduate study, fruitful careers, I wouldn't use fruitful, but okay, careers, management, leadership, all the good stuff. So a lot of the ingredients are still here. Of course, There are many more opportunities. The intensity in which we are pursuing these goals has changed dramatically. The successes are astronomical. They're fabulous. But I think if we talk about the impact of the women of Stern College over these many generations, there's no question the doctors, the lawyers, the psychologists, all walks of life. But the greatest impact has clearly been on women's Torah education. And not only the impact on themselves, but I would say by virtue of what the Torah they've learned, they have transformed our Jewish communities, the homes, the schools, and even the wider community. So it's not just about them and what they've learned, it's about what their learning has done for all of us, men and women alike. And with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists and ask them to take a seat at the front. Dean Berger, I hate to oust you, but we will need your seat for our panelists.
I understood that the moment you said it.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce our three panelists, and then they'll just talk in order, rather than my interrupting and make an introduction for each. So our first speaker this evening will be Mrs. Chaya CB, Neugroschl. She is the head of school of Samuel W. Wang Yeshiva University High School for Girls. She's an educator with over 20 years of pedagogic, curricular, and administrative experience, both in Judaic studies and general studies. Before coming to Central, which is our high school, Mrs. Neugroschl served as assistant principal and co-director of general studies at SAR High School, where she introduced innovative curricular initiatives and special programming. Innovation is her second name. She didn't say that, I did. Okay, previously, Mrs. Neugroschl was the director of admissions at Mayanot High School for Girls, where she also taught Jewish history and philosophy. Mrs. Neugroschl studied for 2 years at Michala College for Women in Israel and earned her BA at Stern College for Women in 1993. She continued her studies at Yeshiva University Bernard Revel Graduate School of Jewish Studies with a focus on history of Halacha and medieval Ashkenaz. She received her MA in Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations from Harvard University in 1998. Her master's thesis was entitled The Nexus of Law and Spirituality in Maimonides' Laws of Charity. Our second speaker will be Mrs. Nechama Price. She is the director of Yeshiva University's Graduate Program for Advanced Talmud Studies, GPATS, from which she earned certification in 2003. She is a senior lecturer in the Bible and Judaic Studies departments at Stern College, where she's been teaching since 2004. Nechama earned a master's degree in Jewish education from the Azrieli Graduate School and an MA in Bible from the Bernard Revel Graduate School. She is also a graduate of the inaugural class at the American branch of Nishmat's Yoetzet Halacha program and currently serves as a Yoetzet to the communities of Englewood, Tenafly, Livingston, West Orange, and Long Branch, New Jersey. Those are pretty widespread communities, but this is a woman who has energy, so she can do it. Nechama is a community scholar and speaks all over North America. And our third speaker is Chaya Sima Koenigsberg, who is a doctoral student at the Bernard Revel Graduate School of Jewish Studies of Yeshiva University, where she received her MA in Jewish philosophy. Previously, she received a BA in psychology at Yeshiva University Stern College for Women, as well as a teaching certificate from Michala Jerusalem College for Women in Israel. Chaya Sima's doctoral research focuses on mysticism and esotericism in medieval Ashkenaz, with special attention to the writings of Rabbi Eliezer of Worms, known as Rokeach. She is currently writing her dissertation on his commentary to the Siddur. The dissertation will focus on the significance of gematria, got that gematria, and other textual calculations, she must be a mathematician, and manipulations in the thought and writings of Rokeach. In addition to her graduate studies, Chaya Sima has served as a member of the Jewish Studies faculty and ninth grade advisor at Manhattan High School for Girls in New York City, as well as Shevach High School in Queens. Our panelists, please come forward.
I think so. Good evening. Thanks so much for the introductions. Thank you for a lot to think about Bais Yaakov. It's a very special moment for me to be here. I don't believe that when I was in Stern College, this building was a part of our campus. But being in a room and looking out at students and colleagues who helped me remember that as much as things have changed, there's so much that has stayed the same. And my particular interest tonight is sharing a retrospective of my own experience. I have no claim to be outlining a research prescriptive approach, but simply to take stock and show a sense of Hakarat Tov to Yeshiva University, to Stern College, to Revel, because in this room are people who have inspired me to do what I did and continue to do, and I have a tremendous sense of appreciation for their efforts and for their energy and for their passion. So tonight I hope to offer just some personal reflections on what advanced Talmud Torah for women means to me, on the role that YU, Stern College, and Revel has played, and what I believe, and how I believe they must continue to play a role in this area. Instead of really reviewing the literature, the historical research that really has been, especially this year, published online and been circulated with significant reflections, I really just want to take a personal approach, and putting words to my personal experience is difficult. The disclaimer I offered about this not necessarily being objective needs to be tempered with the fact that I have been working in women's advanced Jewish education, both in the high school level and in the communal level, for approximately 20 years. And I was happy that you read through some of the bio only because it's in different communities, between Long Island and Manhattan and Teaneck and Queens. There's a lot that I've noticed that I think resonates, ironically, with some of my experiences and what has shaped my commitments, even though what I'm talking about is 25 years old. So, in reflecting on what I wanted to share, I kept going back to an amorphous metaphor. So, again, my apologies, but I'm sure you've heard of this as well. There's this concept called the runner's high, right? That if euphoric mix of personal persistence mingled with a biological endorphins at some point in some strenuous run that results in this weightlessness, a sense of flight where your limits perhaps melt away, your body and your mind are somehow in sync in a way that creates this experience that's described as the runner's high. So I was reviewing this. It's strange, I'm not a runner. I'm not an exerciser even. But I was reviewing this simply because I believe there's a real corollary to some of the passion and the personal investment that young women have described to me in what they experience when they're studying Torah at an advanced level. So I came across one English teacher / runner who explained that during the last 1.5 miles of his 50-mile Ice Age trail run, I don't even know what that is, he describes that, quote, I found myself running far faster than I had all day. I wasn't even conscious of my feet touching the ground as I crested the knoll ahead of the finish line. I wasn't running. It was as if something much larger than I was running me. Generally, most people claim that when you experience a runner's high, it's when the mind takes over the body and the unconscious is leading. So I said it was amorphous. And it's true that I am not a runner. I've never run more than 1/4 mile. I never feel the sense of that flight that describes. I never have that sense of adrenaline rush coming from physical exertion. And in all honesty, I don't really expect to ever have that experience in that domain. I typically get where I need to go as quickly as I can with the help of Waze, which is not always so helpful. Any treadmill or exercise equipment in my home is likely nothing more than a place to hang my clothing. But I sought this out for a specific reason. Because there are times that I've shared alone and with others, where I've sweat through multiple t-shirts, paced my room exhilarated, enthralled, entranced as I recounted and recalled Ba'al Peh every step in a halachic argument. Whether it was about securing the practice of Jews loaning money to other Jews with a fee, or the dozens of linguistic, thematic, textual connections between Mechirat Yosef and Megillat Esther. For the last 25 years, that's been my runner's high. I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I really miss the pre-digital age, when instead of endless open computer tabs, I piled svarim high on my dining room table with post-it notes sticking out as I added layer upon layer of sources and insights in creating a shir, jumping up and running for another sefer, connecting another rishon, a different meforish, a different agada, a new halacha, language, connecting to language, and the growth of a shir, and the experience of the birth of an idea, and the realization that somehow many Torot were converging within me and on this table and emerging from someplace so deep and so personal that finally there is that experience of a euphoric connection between yourself and your community, between your ideas and the legacy in front of you, between yourself and your faith. And for me, learning enervated every muscle, quickened my breath, raised my heart rate. I felt and I experienced ki hem chayenu, even if they weren't always orach yameinu. After awkwardly lugging piles and piles of svarim to the local Xerox center with glue sticks and scissors in my pockets, I'd come to present a shir, whether there was 5 people or 125 people, and honestly feel the awe and trembling that I would read about in Rav Aaron's essays or in the Rav's svarim. And I was always aware that I was merely inching beneath the surface of its majesty and always eager for more. That was and remains my own personal runner's high. A point of inspiration from a runner, there's a field apparently, for those of us non-runners, it's kind of astounding, called ultra running. And one of the legends of ultra running, Yanis Kouris, describes, some may ask why I run such long distance. There are reasons. During the ultras, I come to a point where my body is almost dead and my mind has to take leadership. When it's very hard, there's a war going on behind the body and the mind, between the body and the mind. If my body wins, I'll give up. If my mind wins, I'll continue. And at that point, I feel I'm a bit disconnected, and yet more connected than ever before. I experience my personality, my drive, above and beyond my body. I believe that for some women, Talmud Torah provides that opportunity. And it's surprising to me that the exclusive nature of our infrastructure in our community continues to raise specious questions about the motivation of Talmud Torah without recognizing the very necessary possibility that someone who's committed to their own spiritual, intellectual growth might really actually simply need it. This has not always been true for me. In great contrast, I grew up in Crown Heights, where Talmud Torah wasn't included in the long list of expectations for me in my development as a good frum Jew. I want to share with you a very quick reflective piece that I wrote 17 years ago. Sorry, a little longer than that. After having left Crown Heights, finished Shana Aleph and Shana Bet in Mechlala, turned down my admissions offer to NYU, joined Stern College, studied at Revel, and completed my master's in advanced Jewish studies at Harvard. These were my thoughts, retrospectively, and I believe I'm surprised, because I grew up in a different world, how relevant they are today. When it came to Torah study, I perceived two polar realities in the schools of my youth. On the one hand, Limudei Kodesh, all subjects included, involved pedantic and mechanical memorization of what seemed to be endless lists of predetermined facts, interpretations, and opinions. There was no room, no time, and no inclination to personalize the learning process by seeking out the individual's voice thought process or insights. We sat quietly, copied copious notes, never presuming to inch our way beneath the surface of the material with probing questions or thoughtful insights. Becoming intimately familiar with the method of Torah study was not amongst my school's educational goals. Molding obedient and observant Orthodox Jews was. Understanding the Jewish life that we were living was left to others. On the other hand, we knew that knowledge of Torah was a source of living a divinely inspired life. We knew that the sages of yesteryear and today had delved and were delving into the Torah with their entire intellectual arsenal. We knew that there were reasons and answers, they were simply beyond our reach. There was scant mention of the names, titles, terms of halachic sages and texts. While their presence was invoked daily to validate religious practice, theirs was a territory into which we could not venture. We dutifully learned what they had studied, but it did not and could not become truly our own. That, I believe, is a world that left me and leaves many young women completely uninspired, without a path. Our last mandatory Jewish education enrollment requirement is in high school. If we don't leave a path ahead for these young women, they won't follow down that road. The copious notes will only continue as far as their exam. For me, the change began after a small taste of textual learning in Mechala in the decision to join Stern College. I came to Stern College and found a home where my intellectual and religious aspirations could be merged. The opportunity to learn more, to grow in sophistication in that learning was my primary objective. To join a community where women could have access to Talmud Torah at advanced levels was priceless. When it came to course choices, that access was in fact limited and sometimes just a taste, but it fed my soul, and more importantly, I was invited into a communal matrix that understood that Talmud Torah was the primary objective, and there was an axiological assumption that invited me into the Beit Midrash, intellectual if not physical, communal if not always, but still tantalizing and important. Ironically, my own learning began with a yearning to be included in the Beit Midrash, craving access and insight to the texts within its hallowed halls. However, in recent years, through my experience in the field of Jewish education, where what we do can only come so close to the fullest yeshiva program, and the infrastructure, as well as the time, as well as the commitment, as well as the finances, are just not there. It seems clear to me that instead of just asking, how do we get into the Beit Midrash, I think we need to ask, how do we redefine the Beit Midrash? How do we allow the Beit Midrash to extend beyond just the hallowed texts and just the most intensive form of insight? While texts and the actual tactile exploration of the words, the ideas, the themes, the values, and the interconnected layers of each volume and each page in the Beit Midrash represents only a rarefied experience of hafoch ba ba'afoch ba dekula ba. Now, I believe we need to redefine that and invite into the Beit Midrash and into our value structure an entirely new understanding of hafoch ba dekula ba that is far more interdisciplinary, recognizing that just as math speaks to data analytics, shouldn't Sanhedrin speak to politics? Shouldn't our Torah studies at the highest levels invite in the wisdom that's gained from people who aren't necessarily only in the Beit Midrash, and a more interdisciplinary orientation towards what the Beit Midrash is asking and valuing and demanding of us as a Jewish people would further the tam and the taste and the appreciation of hafoch ba dekula ba, inviting so many more members into that experience. We may not be sufficiently served by inviting only more members, men and women, into the Beit Midrash as it currently exists, but I do believe we would benefit from expanding our definition of hasmada and increasing the length and the width of the runner's track, allowing more people to experience and enjoy that runner's high that is the result of striving, pushing to outrun our limitations, to outrun our physical and social and communal limitations, to feel just for a moment that we're unified, whole, body and soul, on fire, breaking our limits, in flight, lifted in our own Avodat Hashem. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you everyone for coming. Special thank you to all my students in the back who I know have a midterm tomorrow or next week. I would like to say 5 extra points, but the dean is sitting right here, and I don't know if I can say that. I proudly stand here today to speak to you about Yeshiva University's impact on women learning. And let me state up front, I've been a beneficiary of Yeshiva's investment in women's learning. I've had the tremendous privilege to spend so many years learning here at Yeshiva College. First in Stern, then in GPATS, Israeli, and also Revel. And then I got the really big privilege to sit in the Beit Midrash of Stern College for 4 more years, learning individually with students every hour with a different student. Since then, I began teaching halacha, which includes much Gemara, as well as Tanakh here in Stern, and I really have the honor of teaching all of you in the back, but been here for 15 years. Only because of my years of learning at Yeshiva University was it even possible for me to teach at Stern, become trained as a Yoetzet Halacha, and now be the director of GPATS. My particular story may be different, but the broader narrative is fairly common. Yeshiva has created an environment for women to experience a top-notch education, leading to personal religious growth and opportunities for communal and professional impact for them later in life. I would like to speak about both of these factors, the education and the ability that is now made available to women to learn at Yeshiva University, as well as the leadership opportunities now available to women because of that education. Going back 20 years, it was rare to find a place for women to be able to learn Gemara. I went to an extremely impressive mainstream high school in the New York area, will not say which, and was never allowed to look at a Gemara. It was read to me from a photocopy, and I was never allowed or really encouraged to look down at the text or ever to read it back. I was not introduced to the study of Gemara until I reached seminary, where it was optional, and then finally I entered the Beit Midrash of Stern College. My story is a very typical one for women of my generation. On the one hand, we were already living in an environment where there was serious Talmud Torah for women, but at the same time, we were restricted by the lack of opportunities to study the text of Gemara. However, today, there are a number of high schools that teach Gemara to their female students. For some schools, it's still optional, and many it is mandatory. So many women today are learning Gemara on a higher level than ever before, even before entering the Stern Beit Midrash. In other words, we now have a generation of women who are beginning to live in a world where Talmud Torah for women, including the study of Gemara, is a meaningful part of their religious development. As a teacher here at Stern, I have found that the number of students in my classroom who've been exposed to Gemara learning and who have skills in learning has grown tremendously over the years. I'm impressed with their level of learning, and I'm impressed with the way they come in and the education they're getting in high school and in seminary, and I see a large change in my classroom. Because of this change, the Gemara classes at Stern have become more advanced. There are opportunities now to take advanced Gemara where you can sit and learn every morning, first in the Beit Midrash and then later in the classroom, or to take intermediate Gemara twice a week. And now this semester has begun a new Gemara class in the evening. This explosion of opportunity has really helped level the field for women, allowing many women to engage in Gemara learning. Concurrently, Yeshiva University took the initiative to develop female scholars via the creation of GPATS. The graduate program in Advanced Talmudic Studies is a master's degree program that enables women to sit and learn Gemara all morning and Halacha all afternoon. This experience completely transforms you. As a former student and now the director, I clearly see how GPATS changed my entire life. It changed my career path. It gave me a religious education that I couldn't have gotten anywhere else in America. This program allows women to have opportunities and roles that are unprecedented. It allows women to not only aspire to new manifestations of their connection to Hashem, but to share that with other people. Allow me to explain. You see, 15 years ago, when I graduated the GPATS program, the issue that we all faced was the lack of opportunities of what to do with our Torah learning in the realm of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Most schools would only hire women to teach Tanakh. There were only a handful of schools that would consider a female Gemara Halacha teacher, and we all competed for those very, very few jobs. Not only that, but we were even discouraged from even trying to get the jobs or discouraged from sitting and learning. I remember very clearly a specific rabbi who I truly respected, and he came over to me one day while I was in GPATS and he said, "Why are you sitting and learning Gemara and Halacha? No one's ever going to hire you to teach that. Why are you wasting your time?" And I don't necessarily blame him for saying that because his advice was in some ways true. There were very few opportunities at that time for women to teach those subjects. But fast forward now 15 years, as the director of GPATS, I get calls from so many high schools every single year searching for female Talmud teachers. Each year I turn so many of the schools away because I don't have enough students or even alumni to fill all the positions that are now available for women. The women of GPATS often get numerous offers from different high schools that they actually even have the ability to choose, which was something that was unheard of when I was first looking for a job. No one seems nervous anymore that there aren't enough positions to go around. The contrast from 15 years ago to today is really, really startling. Similarly, the high-level education that has been provided by YU and GPATS has created the ability for more women to become involved in community leadership in serious and rigorous ways. I get many calls from all over the country from shul rabbis or community leaders requesting to partner with my GPAT students, either for a one-time event or for something much more long-term. I am regularly emailing my GPATS alumni in America who are in the field of Jewish education with exciting opportunities that never would have been available to them 10 years ago. Even while learning in the GPATS program, as a bunch of them are here, we encourage our students to take on leadership roles within the community. There's an internship program where women are hired by shuls to come and to give shiurim and drashot on a regular basis. Or some communities just want one or two students to come once or twice during the year. Last year, Judy Berman is here, thank you for arranging this. Jamaica Estates launched a GPATS Beit Midrash program where our students give shiur once a month to the community, and it is absolutely beautiful every single month sending a student there. And we really encourage other communities to reach out to us to give us more learning opportunities. But there is one other way that I would say our program truly connects to helping women of our communities, and that is the fact that almost all American Yotzot Halacha were first educated in Stern and GPATS. It is a very smooth transition from GPATS to the challenging and intense Yotzet program. A Yotzet Halacha is a woman who is trained thoroughly in the area of Taharat Mishpacha, Nida, childbirth, intimacy, birth control, and other topics related to those issues. Yotzet Halacha are helping women on a daily basis to keep the mitzvot correctly, saving a woman from being tmeah when she's not supposed to be, saving marriages, and helping those with infertility to have children. Although this program is not connected to Yeshiva University, almost all Yotzot in America, as well as many of the American Yotzot in Israel, were first trained in Stern and in GPATS. I know for myself, the only way I could have become a Yotzet Halacha is by the fact that I was first sitting and learning here in Stern and then in GPATS. I believe this is the cycle of religious growth that energizes these trends. By creating a wide base of women who are religiously motivated to study, this creates the need for scholars. In turn, these scholars allow for the community and the schools to see the benefit of their scholarship, thus motivating more women to come and learn. Often when I speak in different communities and speak to the women, here's what they tell me. We want to have more female role models in our community. Or, I want my daughter to know that a woman can also be a Torah scholar. Or, I wish when I was younger I had such opportunities. You know, we live in a very exciting age for women. Women are able to learn on levels that are unprecedented. There were always individual women who were, heard about Sarah Schneer, who were given high-level, I think so, education, Torah Sheba'al Peh. But now this type of education is available to everyone if they want it. So my message to all women sitting here in front of me is to grab the opportunities that are now available to you, both learning opportunities as well as leadership and communal ones. These all can be opportunities to express ourselves religiously, to strive to maximize our religious growth personally and communally. However, we also can't become complacent with these opportunities. There is more still to accomplish. For my 3 daughters, and for each of your daughters, current or future, I look forward to the time when it is plainly obvious for our Torah community that women can be Torah scholars, that all women can have a female role model to look to. And especially I wish one day women who want to sit and learn and teach have no struggles or obstacles in their path, no funny looks given to them or people questioning their intentions as to why they want to learn Torah, but rather it'll just be obvious to everyone. Women can also love learning Torah, teaching and growing and finding God in their lives through the text of Torah, including Torah Sheba'al Peh. In the meantime, we owe tremendous hakaras hatov to Yeshiva University for paving the way for female scholars, educators, and of course our students. I know that I live in debt to this university every single day of my life for completely changing the trajectory of my life, allowing me to sit and learn in a Beit Midrash for 9 years and then teach Torah ever since. But my story is just one of so many stories of the alumni of Yeshiva University and GPETs. For so many of you who are still sitting within these walls, your story is yet to be written. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's truly an honor to sit on this distinguished panel at this esteemed event in honor of President Berman, taking stock of women's Torah education and to be able to speak as a beneficiary of a rich Torah education. My standing here, I think, is the fulfillment of the efforts and hopes of my parents who are here and my grandparents. There were no institutions of formal Jewish education available for either of my grandmothers growing up here in New York City at the beginning of the previous century. My grandfather taught my grandmother to read Hebrew when they married, even though she was a religious woman. And when my mother was young, that same grandfather worked to build a Bais Yaakov elementary school in the East Bronx so that she could have a Torah education. And when I was a young girl and I would ask my mother for help with my Rashi homework, she would always remind me that she could never ask her mother for help with Chumash or Navi homework, and that I should be grateful that I have a mother who can help me. And I am. I've received a Torah education that was unimaginable for women 3, 2, and in some ways even 1 generation ago. And when I think of the contrast between my opportunities and those of my grandmothers, I'm reminded of a famous story in our family. The story goes that when my grandmother was pregnant with my father, one night in the middle of the winter, she craved watermelon. And she told her husband, "I need watermelon." And she sent him out in the middle of the night, in the middle of the winter, to find her watermelon. And he did. And my father, who was subsequently born, loves watermelon to this day. Fast forward, a few years ago, I was sitting writing a doctoral paper for a course in Revel, and it had to do with the Ibn Ezra's commentary to Megillat Esther. And I was nearly done one winter night when I came across a footnote that said that the Ibn Ezra actually wrote 2 commentaries to the book of Esther. And I was only working off the one in the common printed edition. So in a panic, I told my husband, "I need you to go out and get me the Ibn Ezra 2nd commentary to Esther. I need the Ibn Ezra," I told him, just like my grandmother needed watermelon. And he went out at 10:30 at night across the neighborhood to the YU library, and he retrieved the Ibn Ezra 2nd commentary to Esther. And when our daughter was born, I thought, maybe she'll grow up to be an Ibn Ezra scholar. When I've told that story to my Bais Yaakov high school students, they laugh. And then there's always one or two that ask, well, what were you writing a paper about the Ibn Ezra for? Or how is it that you're still in school? Unbeknownst to them, they've been benefiting from my graduate education. But when I tell them what I'm doing, for many in the room, it's their first time hearing about academic Jewish studies. And the fact that a woman's Torah education does not need to end with high school or even a year of study in Israel. But today, women are able to pursue their formal Jewish education far beyond that. I vividly remember a teacher of mine in high school telling the class that for many women, high school represents the peak of their Torah education. Never again will they spend as many hours studying Torah as we were doing then. The idea that my Torah education would peak at 18 or 19 years old devastated me. And as I sat there, I was determined to prove her wrong. And we're still in touch today, and she recently told me that of her 1,000 students over the years, she thinks I'm the only one that went on to academic Jewish studies. So it's not a path everyone follows, but I'm grateful to YU for providing that path for those of us who are interested. And I wanted to just speak a little bit about my personal experience at YU. I came to YU first for Stern College. I chose Stern because of the Jewish studies courses, although I was not a Jewish studies major. I remember when I was deciding between colleges, one Shabbos, our shul had a female scholar in residence. And as I listened to her presentation, I was so impressed with its depth. And as I sat there, I thought, this is what I want to do, and Stern is going to get me there. And at the Kiddush that morning, I told my father I chose Stern. I first studied for a year in Israel, and when I came to Stern College, I expected Judaic Studies classes more or less to be similar to what I had experienced in high school and in seminary. But in the academic setting at Stern and the courses that I chose, I encountered Jewish studies that was completely different in scope and rigor from what I was accustomed to. There was a superstructure to the courses. There was a syllabus. There were carefully organized lectures with a beginning, a middle, and an end. The professors had a thesis or a theme that they presented throughout the course, bringing examples and proof texts, scholarly articles that we agreed with or disagreed with. They looked at the broader context of history and culture. Commentators weren't just name-dropped. The Ramban says this, the Malbim says that, but we looked at where they lived and when they lived, what school of thought they were part of or they broke from. It was the first time that I had heard of the notion of polemic, that great Torah minds were engaged and thinking and arguing with ideas of their time, even in their Torah commentaries. It opened my mind. It was so exciting. I loved it. There's definitely a shift in emphasis between the Beis Medrash and academic Torah studies. It's less inspirational, more analytical. But I learned to find inspiration in the texts as they spoke to me, and I did come away inspired, perhaps at a deeper level, because of all these added layers of richness that I was encountering. And most importantly, at Stern, I encountered role models, women who had made advanced Torah study their careers. Women like Dr. Levine and Dr. Grunhaus, and I spoke to them and they advised me, and I ultimately decided to apply to the joint Judaic Studies program between Stern and Revel. There are other graduate programs in Judaic Studies, but for me it was important to stay within a Torah Umada setting. I knew that when I went to Revel, I would be studying with professors that are renowned in their fields and also observant and who share the same sensitivities and values that I was coming with. And so it was at Revel, the depths just got deeper. I focused on Jewish philosophy, but I also took courses in Jewish history and Midrash, and I'm trying to bring it all together now in my dissertation. I've learned to read new languages, to decipher medieval manuscripts. I'm studying things I didn't even know existed when I started, and I'm loving every minute. But more than just opportunity, I received encouragement at YU. It's not always easy to be a student and a teacher and a mother at the same time. But YU has been so encouraging, almost like a family. I got married when I was still in Stern. My husband was learning in REITs. We moved to Washington Heights, so we were living the dream. And I had my first baby when I was in the middle of the master's program. And when I would meet with Dean Hyman, Alav Shalom, to discuss paper topics or course planning, he would always encourage me to go on and apply to the doctoral program. I'd be sitting in his office with my baby stroller, And he would tell me how his best studying was done when he was awake with his baby son in the middle of the night. And I should go on to the doctoral program. And that extra push at that stage in my life was so meaningful, and it did motivate me to apply. And throughout my years in the doctoral program, Dean Berger has been so encouraging, and I'm very appreciative for his constant support, along with all of my professors who really extended themselves on my behalf. Just recently, when I was trying to decide on a dissertation topic, it became clear that I would need to consult a manuscript of the Rokeach's Siddur. The most complete manuscript is housed in Oxford, and there's a microfilm copy in Israel I was trying to get a hold of, and then I found out that there's a copy in JTS. But I was delaying going. I had never been there. I had never examined a manuscript in microfilm. Where would I go? What would I say to them? What would I wear? I don't know. I was pushing it off. And when one of my professors, Dr. Elazar Hurwitz, who's been very encouraging, found out that I hadn't gone yet, he was talking to my husband. He said, "What, your wife hasn't gone? Tell her that this Thursday I'm going to JTS and she should come with me. I'll show her where to go." And so we went together on Thursday. We schlepped on the subway and by car. And just to give you an image, Dr. Hurwitz is not a young man. President Berman is the 4th YU president that he's teaching under, as he was hired by Dr. Belkin. And he went all the way with me, took me exactly where I needed to go, got me set up at the microfilm reading machine, told the librarian, take good care of her. And when he walked away, she whispered to me, "Is that your father?" I said, "No, it's my professor, but he acts very fatherly." And I sat with the microfilm for 2 hours, and I was able to read it, Baruch Hashem, and settle on a dissertation topic. And all the while, Dr. Hurwitz sat on the other side of the room just talking to the librarians. And it became very clear to me that he didn't have any of his own work to do that day, and his only work was to take me to make sure that I was progressing. There's a custom well, first I'll just say that it's things like that that have made my time at YU so special. And I would just close by saying that there's a custom for women to say a short Yehi Ratzon after performing the mitzvot that are considered the women's special mitzvot, lighting Shabbos candles, separating challah, and when immersing in the mikveh. It's the Yehi Ratzon we say at the end of Shemona Esrei, Sheyibana Beis HaMikdash. I say it because my mother says it, she says it because her mother said it, and so on. In that prayer, we ask Hashem to rebuild the temple, and we also say, V'sein chalkeinu b'sorasecha. Grant us our portion in your Torah. Now, I don't know what my grandmothers had in mind when they said, grant us our portion in your Torah. But when I say it, I concentrate on being grateful that I can have a portion in Torah, insofar as learning Torah and teaching Torah. And I pray that Hashem grant me the ability to bring my unique portion, my unique contribution to fruition. When I was a little girl, my father used to bless me that I grow to be a Talmida Chachama. And I'd just like to express my gratitude to President Berman, to YU, for helping me towards that goal and for its broader role in enhancing women's Torah education.
Well, this has been a spectacular evening. I just want to, before we open for questions, I just want to acknowledge that there are several faculty members here who have joined us this evening, and we appreciate everything they do for our women and for this university. Okay, so now we have just a few moments to open the floor to questions. If you would raise your hands, and we'll recognize you, and please say which of our speakers you'd like to address. Rabbi Blau.
When you use the term that Bais Yaakov became a movement, it means more than movements of schools, it was also a youth movement. And in the writings of Ruth Grunfeld, she focuses a great deal on the role that Schneer played in being the mother of the movement and in the spiritual leader. So while in a technical, educational, formal sense, her role became diminished as more of a professional educator took a role, but as if we see it as a movement in the broadest of terms, her role never diminished, and then she became a mythical figure subsequently. I thought that was, an aspect you didn't get a chance to discuss, and I just wanted to get your response to it.
Okay, thank you very much. And certainly what you bring up has a great deal of merit. Over the course of my dissertation, in a chapter, I address a great deal about Benos and the youth movement that accompanied Sarah Schneer and Bais Yaakov schools. And I would more or less agree with your assessment that the schools that Bais Yaakov innovated in many ways were not quite as groundbreaking as some may have asserted. Is something that I explore from a number of different angles. I think there's a lot of merit to that approach. That said, what Sarah Schneer truly innovated, or what Bais Yaakov as a Tnu'ah, as it often calls itself in the interwar period, really did succeed in, was in the ways that it recreated Jewish girl culture as a category in and of itself, as a culture that had unique qualities. Through the youth movements and through Benos. Truly, I argue that was the greatest innovation of Bais Yaakov. On the other hand, that was less mainstreamed or standardized than the rest of what we think of Bais Yaakov having did, because not every girl was a member of Benos. Benos's membership rolls in the interwar period were about 1/4 the size of Bais Yaakov's enrollment. But to the extent that Bais Yaakov succeeded in saving a generation of Jewish mothers, it truly did so by creating something that the shtetl mothers were not doing, by creating new spaces, new times, new cultural ceremonies, new ritual performances, and really a Jewish girlhood that had an identity of its own. Sarah Schneer originally was Pariv about the idea of Benos and of a youth movement getting started. Once she saw that it was really great, she threw her weight behind it within a year of its being founded. But within the Benos movement, her persona, her style of Avodat Hashem, her enthusiasm, and her inspiring life story was a very important aspect of the identity that they aspired to grow. So thank you very much for your question.
Yes. I have two questions addressed to Ms. Rosensweig as well. First, can you comment on the language of instruction that was used initially? You spoke briefly about the curriculum, but in what language? Was it Yiddish, like in the yeshivas in Eastern Europe, or was it the lingua franca? Was it the language of the country in which the Bais Yaakov was located? That's the first one. And the second one was there any opposition? You spoke about how it became widely accepted, but by the same token, I wanted to know if there was some pushback, the idea of Chodesh HaSimon and Torah. Were there leaders, Jewish leaders who were opposed to the Bais Yaakov?
Thank you so much for the questions. In terms of the language of instruction, it's actually quite interesting. Within the vast majority of shtetl schools, certainly within Poland, and as far as I know in other countries as well, the language of instruction was almost entirely Yiddish. Perhaps in Vienna, the language of instruction would have been in German. In America, it was in Yiddish. In Palestine, it was in Yiddish. In Poland, it was in Yiddish. But on the higher levels, Bais Yaakov education did entail a certain amount of German study. In fact, the Krakow Seminary offered introductory courses in German, which seems awfully striking. Sarah Schneer was a big believer in speaking Yiddish. But they had courses in German so that the students who came would be able to study the required texts, a great deal of which were the 19 letters of Rav Hirsch and Rav Hirsch's Revel, which at that time had not yet been translated. So in the seminary, there were studies in German. A number of the teachers in the Krakow Seminary were imported German pedagogues, both rabbis and women who had graduated teachers' seminaries in Germany. So in the seminary, there was Yiddish in addition to German spoken and studied. Polish was studied as well for those who wanted to fulfill secondary school certification for Polish state requirements. So there were Polish studies there as well. And as for your second question about opposition, I didn't touch upon it here very much, it's true. But Bais Yaakov did face opposition primarily on the local level. I haven't seen much evidence of organized opposition to Bais Yaakov, but from the exact parties and factions who opposed Agudas Yisrael more generally within cities of Poland and Eastern Europe, the Congress Poland Hasidic groups like the Gerer joined the Aguda with a great deal of enthusiasm, but other groups, including but not limited to the Satmar and many others, were opposed to the idea of the politicization of Orthodoxy taking on the institutional forms of non-Jewish or not religious movements, political movements more generally, and this opposition did play out in fistfights and scuffles and kehillah elections all over the place. That's part of why Bais Yaakov solicited more formal tshuvot to bolster its case by 1928, 29, 33, that these tshuvot were written. But ultimately, across Poland, Bais Yaakov attained enough support that kehilot and rabbis of the towns generally allowed Bais Yaakov to be founded. It was founded in practically every medium or even small-sized shtetl in Poland, particularly Congress Poland. In other regions, there was less enthusiasm and interest, but opposition was more constrained.
This is a question for all of you who are married. I didn't hear anybody say thank you to their husbands like they always do at the Oscars. I've just successfully trained my husband, who's in his 50s, to do the laundry. But I feel like most, until now, I've done way more than my fair share of household organization and work and 3-day yontifs. I don't really see. You have some secret, or how do you organize it? How do you get everything done?
You are 100% right. There is no way I would have done any of the things that I've experienced if I didn't have the support of my husband on every possible level.
First of all, I'd like to point out my husband is here in the back of the room supporting me, so thank you, Jonathan. We do have an agreement that I'm never allowed to thank him in public, so you should just know that that is a known thing, which I just violated. But I think it is true that any woman that takes on a public role and is able to come out in the middle. I should also thank my mother, who is babysitting my children right now. We could go through a laundry list of all the support that you need in order to be able to leave your house and to come give a shiur or prepare a shiur or teach your classes or do whatever role it is that Baruch Hashem, us women are now able to do. It is always a team. It is always done. Husband and my children. My children come with me sometimes. My children have critiqued my shiurim and redone them for me. My children give me pep talks before I leave in the morning. You'll be great, Mom. Because my husband's tired of doing that. So it is a full family affair for anyone to be able to do what they do. And I think it always goes without saying that whenever I do anything, I think credit always goes to my husband, to my kids, to my parents, and everybody else that's involved.
My thank you to my husband was in the longer version of the speech, but when it crossed the 10-minute mark, he cut it out. The thank you that I gave him was obviously for his constant support and for not flinching when on our first date I told him I wanted to get a PhD.
And I also owe a huge debt of gratitude to my husband, and it takes a village to make all of us. I think we all owe a huge amount of support to our families that really do bring us here.
I just want to extend your question and say I don't really know that it's only about the marriage and the marital construct of support. And I think it's really significant to say that it's an entire perspective of a community that requires that type of appreciation, that this is not a sacrifice and it's not a second-tier choice. It's a value that the community values, whether you're married or single, whether you're in graduate school, or looking for a job and considering what your track is. So I appreciate the practical concern, and of course it's also a worldview, but I also think that there's a communal mentality that that I'd love to see more support for, and appreciating that this isn't just the Yechidei Olam or people who happen to find a husband who happens to like the fact that they learn Torah. It's actually part of our communal structure where we value Torah, ki hem chayenu v'aruch yameinu, means that for everybody.
There's another question back.
Hi. You spoke a lot about kind of the present and the panel was a bit supposed to get at present and future. So I wanted to hear a little more about what do you think some of the future challenges are for advanced Torah learning for women, and specifically since the panel is about YU, what do you think YU should be doing to help with some of those changes?
Okay, microphone closest to me. I think that I hinted to the fact that I think it's surprising to me how much has changed and how much has stayed the same. Infrastructure-wise, opportunity-wise, I think we currently have more opportunities and greater rigor and greater depth than we've ever had before. Attitudinally and communally, I don't believe we've gone far enough. I don't believe we've really shifted enough hearts and minds, as is evidenced by, I think, a notable scant opportunities for communal spaces for women to celebrate their Torah together with the whole community and not just in some small select space where people who are 55 and above and not working just happen to have extra time at 10 o'clock in the morning to have a share. We haven't yet created enough communal spaces where the value of advanced women's learning and their contribution to the entire community is celebrated. That can be, this is a discussion actually that I know is happening on a broad level, not just with YU. My expectation, my hope is that in our formulation in most recent months with Rabbi Berman's initiative, where we are trying to establish the cross currents of Torah values in all fields, allows for more of that to happen. And again, I just hinted to that, so that Talmud Torah or the Bais Medrash as it is valued is not just this rarefied, only if you're in the Bais Medrash for 12 hours a day for 25 years do you have the opportunity to contribute to the conversation, but becomes a bit more democratic and a bit more inclusive of people who have what to offer. Additionally, an interdisciplinary approach where there's a greater intersection of the various wisdoms, I think will allow for some of that exclusive nature to be more open, without only being a conversation about the rabbinate.
Thanks, Davida, for your question. Here's what I think from the inside here at Yeshiva University. You know, what YU should do, and I think it's a lot to discuss, it's a lot to think about. I think, however, a lot of what already exists just needs to be made bigger. I think that it's a little bit sad that GPATS is normally limited to between 10, if we're lucky, we get to 20, but we don't, 15 students. And it's not necessarily because it's restricted by the institution, but it's restricted by how many women want to actually sit and learn. Or the Yoetzet Halacha program, if they don't mind me saying, people are not banging down the doors to get into those programs. So what we need in order to move forward is two things. We need more opportunities, which can be created by Yeshiva University or by the OU or whatever opportunities that can be made, even though I think there's a lot of trying on all sides. But there actually has to be people that are then wanting to take those opportunities. And there has to be community understanding that we need to create these opportunities. I find very often that the reason why there will be scholar-in-residence women in shuls is because the women of the shul got together and said to the shul or to the board or to the rabbi, we want to bring in more female scholars. Or the way many yoatzot have gotten their jobs in communities is because the women got together and said to the rabbi or to the shul, we would like to hire a yoetzet, and they've raised the money and made sure that that has come to be. So I think to some extent we can look to Yeshiva University and to organizations and say, create more opportunities, but I think it's reflected back on us women too. Number one, let us get involved in creating more opportunities. Let us go to our shuls, to our schools, to our communities and say, let's create more. Let's make this a norm. Let's have it that it's not one token Shabbos a year that a woman scholar gets to show up, but rather this happens much more often. Or if a woman scholar comes, it's not just men, it's not just women who get to hear her, men can be invited too. But then from another perspective, which I would say more looking at you per se, we need more women like you who want to sit and learn and want to go out there and make a difference. You know, we often talk about it would be so nice if we had more women doing X. So let's actually have those women doing X. Let's actually, have people do what they're saying they wish would be out there for them to be able to do. So I think we could look to the future. I think we are moving in a beautiful direction. I think GPATS is getting stronger. We can make it even bigger. We can make it stronger. We can make more organizations and types of things where women can sit and learn. We can, try to create more opportunities for women, which, as I said in my speech, exist already. We just have no one to fill in those places. So we need to create more women that want these opportunities. We need to create more opportunities for them within communities that have not yet had women come in to do these types of things. And I think by definition, when that happens, all of a sudden, the education for women and the bigger programs are going to get larger because there's going to be women banging down the door saying, we want to get in.
I definitely agree that as women, we have to add light, as Rev Cook would say. And I'd also like to see the expansion of what women study beyond just what's been traditionally studied and what men have traditionally studied, such as advanced study of Midrash Haggadah, which has a lot of the rigor of Talmud and a lot of the inspiration that I think many women are looking for.
I just want to mention one thing. As I look back on all the years and the number of graduates, we graduated thousands and thousands of women from Stern College, and the vast majority have not stayed in Jewish education or gone on for higher degrees in Jewish education. They've chosen other career paths. But I want to recognize the contributions they are making to elevating the life of the Jewish community, because I think that they've had a profound impact in their homes. The nature of the conversation at the Shabbos table is invigorated by the fact that they have a higher level Jewish education, even if they are not in chinuch per se. I think their expectations, the teachers in the schools where they send their children, have been raised because they know things. They know what quality is. They know when you separate, a Baba Maisa from reality, from what's the pshat and what's the meaning. I think they've also encouraged their husbands to learn more. The husbands who are not also in Jewish education or Jewish studies are not in kollel, and they're in a profession, and in the evening they could easily do something else. And these women who know the value and the beauty of Torah encourage their husbands to learn. So I think the impact of the thousands of graduates of this university, the women, the impact they've had on the home, the school, and their husbands, the men in their community, is profound, even if they themselves have not chosen to stay and go on in Jewish education. I think that's important to recognize that, because that I think is changing communities along with the other changes that we hope to see in the future. I think we're going to wrap it up now, unless somebody has an urgent question or comment to make. It was a lovely evening. When I got down here early and the room was empty, and I thought, oh my gosh, and then it filled up, and it's been beautiful. So thank you so much for coming. And